it for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
Playing on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
Playing on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
S-I-C-K.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. With Tony Marinaro.
55 seconds left in the penalty, a minute and 27 seconds left in regulation time. Boston 4, Montreal 3. Lafleur coming out rather gingerly on the right side. He gives it into Lemaire, back to Lafleur. Oh!
The sickest Montreal Canadiens podcast.
You're in the spot!
Sports entertainment like no other.
Rejoint, on lui fait perdre la rondelle, une passe devant. Et c'est le dégagement et ce sera la victoire des Canadiens. Stanley pour les Canadiens, le 23e de l'histoire.
You found the dogs! John, you found the dogs! He found the dogs! And all together, they worked a young team to the top. And now, a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup!
Brought to you by Energy Transportation Group. Driven to be different. La Vida Tibi. Embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination. It's gonna be sick.
Good Friday evening, everyone. I'm Matt Ohayon. I am the Hebrew Hammer. Welcome to the Sick Podcast. Another week in the books. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful weekend ahead. Let's get things going. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by Energy Transportation Group. Energy Transportation Group is a leading full-service logistics provider serving all of North America, driven to be different. We're also brought to you by La Bittt Tibi beer, brewed in Quebec, a winner of international awards. La Bittt Tibi offers quality microbrewery beers made with premium ingredients for everyone's taste. La Bittt Tibi, embrace your true nature. And of course, Playground, step into the excitement at Playground with the Mystery High Hand promotion. Every day, starting at 10 a.m., you have a chance to win a share of over $120,000 in cash. Prizes available until May 31st. Whether you play from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. daily or join the late night action from 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. from Sunday to Thursday, you could win up to $25,000. For more details, visit playground.ca. Don't miss out. Swing by Playground and get in on the winning. Got two more. Hang with me here. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. It can be easy to ignore our social battery and spread ourselves thin, especially with social gatherings picking up after the winter. Therapy can give you the self-awareness to build a social life that doesn't drain your battery. Find your social sweet spot with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Montreal to get 10% off your first month. And finally, Tony will be hosting a live podcast from Souvlaki Authentique Lachine on May 30th at 1 p.m. Come meet Tony and the Sick team and try out their delicious menu located at 1050 Rue Notre Dame in Lachine in the beautiful city of Montreal. All right. So now that that's out of the way, not a crazy busy week Canadians-wise. We got some Canadians, I guess you could call it news. Caden Gooley is moving on to the semifinals with Team Canada in the IIHF World Championships. And Owen Beck is in the Memorial Cup. Other than that, not too much, but don't worry. I have thought of two perfect angles to attack for this episode. And who better to do it with than my usual Friday guest, Mr. Stu Cowan of the Montreal Gazette. Stu, how we doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Okay, so last night I'm watching Dallas and Edmonton. What a game. One of the games of the playoffs so far, I would say. Yeah. And I'm just thinking, a couple nights ago, I'm watching the New York Rangers and Florida Panthers, and I'm thinking to myself, if the Canadiens want to get to this point of these four teams, who should they model themselves after?
Good question. I'd say the Rangers, because you have that Jeff Gorton connection there too. And, he was a GM when they started the rebuild with the Rangers. I think it was like 6 years ago. We see the results now. Your good players need to play tough in the playoffs. I think we spoke about this last week with the Maple Leafs. You look at Chris Kreider and guys like that and Panarin, and they come to play in the playoffs. And those are the kind of guys you need. And I think the Canadiens have some of those guys right now. Nick Suzuki leading the way, so that he comes to play hard every night. There's different ways to build teams, but I think the Rangers, and especially I said the template is there. Jeff Gorton started that rebuild, I know he was a guest on one of the other Sick podcasts earlier this season, and he was talking about how he still follows the team closely. He sees a lot of names he knows every day on the score sheet, guys that he either drafted or traded for. It's a team that they built a lot through the draft. They got lucky. They got the number one pick and got Lafreniere. They made some good trades. Obviously, were able to acquire Panarin and a couple other guys. But I think that's sort of the path the Canadiens are following. I think this summer we're going to see some trades. I think they're going to try and speed up the rebuild a little bit. They're not going to mortgage the future to do that. But I think it'll be a similar thing to what we saw with the Rangers. And, the Canadiens are going into year 3 of the rebuild. It's still young, but I think that's a pretty good template to look at. And I think that's obviously the template that Jeff Gorton's using moving forward.
So it's the only thing with that template is that, it's easy to attract free agents to a city like New York.
Yeah.
It's the place to be, really, is what it is. And they were able to attract Panarin, who was probably one of the best UFA signings, one of the very rare UFA signings that really, really pays off. They fall into a trade with Mika Zibanejad. It's tough, but I see the vision of the Canadiens and what they're doing in trying to follow that. It's going to be interesting to see what they do in this offseason, because is this the offseason where they attack for a marquee name? Is there really that marquee name out there at the right age, at the right price? Who knows? But man, it's hard to watch the Dallas Stars and not think that what a setup they have. They have
the big advantage too. No state income tax in Dallas, which is a huge advantage. You're talking about New York. Yeah, guys do want to go play there. It's an amazing city. It's an amazing building to play in. It's expensive to live in New York. You tax quite heavily in New York also. So there's similarities with what the Canadiens, whereas in Dallas, I mean, the money that these guys make compared to what they would make in New York or Montreal or a place like that. But the Canadiens are trying to make Montreal a much more appealing place to come play. The fact they got Cole Caulfield to sign long-term, they got Nick Suzuki to sign long-term. The word is around the league that players from Montreal who have played here already or still here or have been traded away, they like playing for Marty St. Louis. They like the concepts and systems he uses. Jeff Gorton and Kent Hughes have shown that they treat people properly here. Jeff Petrie, example, guys like that. So they're trying to make Montreal more of an appealing place to come. But you're right, Montreal's still not the top of the list of a lot of players who are free agents. And I'm sure Montreal's still the list on a lot of no trade clauses because of taxes and weather and language and the fact the team hasn't been very good for a long time. So it is more of a difficult situation for the Canadiens. Will they be able to get a big free agent like a Panarin to come to Montreal? Maybe in time, a couple of years. I don't think they're going to get that this year, but maybe a couple of years from now, if they're on the verge of winning. Players want to win no matter where they're playing. But watching the playoffs now, it just shows you just how difficult it is to get into the playoffs and to win in the playoffs. I mean, you look at the Bruins and you look at what Florida did to them after they beat Toronto. It's the NHL is so, the parity from the salary cap has tightened things up so much. The loser point has made it easier for some teams to stay in playoff contention, which is what it was designed for. But it's so hard to get in the playoffs, and we're seeing it now. We're only halfway through. As I say, it's the hardest trophy in sports to win. For basically 2 months, you play every second night, and they beat the hell out of each other, and the last man standing at the end gets to hoist the cup. But in a game like last night, you're talking about Edmonton, a long overtime game like that, and they're right back at it 2 nights later. So it's I think it's just showing, for Canadiens fans who are getting anxious and maybe a little bit impatient. It's hard to rebuild. It's hard to get into the playoffs, and it's even harder to win the Stanley Cup. And we're seeing that, I think, with all 4 teams that are left right now.
Well, the biggest point in that it being the hardest, trophy in sports to win is that usually we see, in years past, we've seen Tampa Bay win multiple in multiple years. We've seen, obviously the Chicago Blackhawks. We've seen the Detroit Red Wings. We've seen the LA Kings and the Pittsburgh Penguins. These are all quote unquote dynasties. Whereas, the past 2 years, Colorado Avalanche and then the Vegas Golden Knights, Colorado got knocked out in the second round this year. Vegas got knocked out in the first round this year, both by the Dallas Stars. It's year to year, so much can change even though you think you have the blueprint to win for multiple years, which I'm sure Vegas did.
Yeah, and you look at the Oilers. I mean, how many high first-round pick and number one overall picks have they had over the years? And they just, they haven't been able to put it together, right? I saw a chart on social media the other day. It was, over the last 15 years, the teams that have won the most playoff series. And at the top of the list is Tampa with 20, followed by Boston, Chicago, and Pittsburgh with 17. The Canadiens have 9. That's the most of any Canadian team in the last 15 years. The Oilers have 6. So, Canadiens fans are impatient and they complain about the team not being. It's just another example of how hard it is. And, as Mark Bergevin like to say, you have players who get you to the playoffs and players who can get you through the playoffs. The Tampa Bay Lightning have had a lot of players over the years that get you through the playoffs. That, as I was mentioning to you earlier, your best players also have to play tough and play physical and play hard. And for the Canadiens, I found that interesting to look at it. They've had more playoff wins over the last 15 years than any other Canadian team. Over the last 20 years, the Leafs have 1 playoff win. Going back to what we're saying, just about how difficult it is to get to the playoffs and how hard it is to win in the playoffs. But Dallas, as you mentioned before, Dallas has a really good team too. Like, they're big and they're strong. And there's one thing the Canadiens will need to improve on moving forward. And I might have mentioned this last week on the podcast. Chris Nyland's mentioned that. And by the way, congratulations to Chris Nyland and his girlfriend Jamie, who got married yesterday in Hawaii after 15 years. But when Knuckles has been on our HIO show, he's saying, Canadiens need more men. They need more big guys. They need to get bigger. And I think Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton are aware of that. And that's something they'll be looking at moving forward, especially when they have, smallish players like Caulfield. Suzuki plays big. He's not big. Unfortunately, Josh Anderson, one of their big guys, hasn't played like a big guy recently. And you see that with Dallas. Dallas has a big team, and they play a physical style of hockey, and they wear you down. I mean, Florida. Look what Florida is doing with that style that they play. They're built for the playoffs. They really are built for the playoffs. Remember, they came to the Bell Center at the end of the season and they got beat by the Canadiens. I think it was 4-1 or 5-1 or something. And remember some comments on social media, the Panthers aren't going to go anywhere. They're a team that's really, really built for the playoffs. They have a lot of grit, a lot of size, play that system. They frustrate players. They limit shots and, fantastic goaltending, which no team's ever going to win the Stanley Cup without that.
The thing about the Dallas Stars that just impresses me so much is that they have this, you would think that they're veterans, they're old, not they're old guys, so to speak, but they're old guys, is that all these guys, you'd think that one of them would have been drafted by them, but it's not. It's their young core of players and just this spectacular group of veterans that they have. You look down the list of Dallas's draft history, the 2 drafts that come to mind that really, a bunch of them changed this franchise, but, they get 2 players in 2021 and Wyatt Johnston and Logan Stankoven. Then in 2019, they've been hitting a lot. 2019, they get Thomas Harley. 2018, they get Ty Dellandrea, and then the big one in 2017 when they had 3rd overall, they get Miro Heiskanen, Jake Ottinger, and Jason Robertson. That doesn't happen. They're not just lucky to get that.
No.
You got to have the right staff and the right people. Of course, having 3rd overall helps, but hey, we've seen the Canadiens whiff on 3rd overall.
Exactly. So a lot of other teams. Yep.
So, that credit to Dallas, because that is just a very underratedly, not talked about enough, well-run organization in the NHL.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. It's a fun place to go to a game too. The arena that they play in, they got good fan support there. A lot of Canadiens connections going back with Dallas, with Guy Carbonneau having played there, Brian Skrudland having played there, Mike Keane having played there, Bob Gainey, coach and GM there in the past. They have a long history. And you're right, they are a very well-run organization, and they're built very well. They're a really well-constructed hockey team from the net all the way out. Lots of depth, and they play a team game. And again, that's the things that the Canadiens are trying to build here in Montreal, and it's going to take some more time to do it. But those are, all 4 teams that are in the final right now are teams that you can look at and take a little bit from one and a little bit from another, a little bit from another. If you're looking on how to build a winning hockey team, there's no one set formula. As you say, they talk about Edmonton, build through the draft. They had all those high draft picks, and it just never worked out for them. And look how horrible they were earlier this season before they made the coaching change. One of the biggest turnaround stories in a long time in the NHL, bringing in Connor McDavid's old junior coach, and they were like 48-16 or something the rest of the season after he took over. But again, it's been fun hockey to watch. It really has been fun to watch the Panthers style against the Rangers style, and then you look at all the talent on Edmonton against the more depth that they have in Dallas. So I've enjoyed the playoffs so far. Especially the first round was okay, but since then the hockey's been really good.
Yeah, and for the fans out there, clamoring that they should copy the Edmonton formula, it's easy when you get a Connor McDavid in the draft.
Yeah.
That changes a lot of things.
Well, exactly.
So
no knock on Uri Slafkovsky. We said this before. I mean, if they had got the number one pick a year later, you get Connor Bedard. That speeds things up, right? And so Slafkovsky looks like he was the right pick at number one, but not every year you get a Connor McDavid or an Austin Matthews or a Connor Bedard. And this year is another year where there's an elite number one guy, and the Canadiens have, they're picking high again. They're going to have the number 5 pick. They should get another good player, but Celebrini is going to go to San Jose, and that's going to, give them a shot in the arm as far as a rebuild. But look, even with Connor Bedard in Chicago this year, they were still a horrible team, although you can see how good he is, and imagine how good he's going to be once they, 3-4 years down the road, once they rebuild that team.
Yeah, no, it's listen, it's a hard league. It's a hard league because, you see all these teams that, it's really rare. And I feel for Buffalo fans, shout out Mason Miller, when you're bad for so long, it's really tough. And you'd think that you'd be able to figure it out, and if you're whittling in the middle, another fan base who I feel for, even though, they've had their spats with Canadiens fans, is the Carolina Hurricanes, because, everyone online saying you're the new San Jose Sharks. Just give it a couple years. You're going to be the San Jose Sharks of the 2010s. It's a hard league. And, you just hope that you have the right people in place. And, personally, I really think the Canadiens do have the right people in place right now for where they need to be. They have the perfect setup in their organizational depth of not even players. I'm talking, personnel. They're in the right place. At least I think they are.
Well, you look at all the draft picks, high draft picks Buffalo's had, and they haven't made the playoffs since 2011. Imagine that. I mean, Montreal's 3 years in a row, and some people are freaking out during a rebuild. 13 years since the Sabres made the playoffs, which is incredible. And they've had lots of, but it's also the thing with the Canadiens now is they have some consistency. Like I don't think Marty St. Louis is going to get fired this year if they don't play well. And you need when you just the Sabres, it's just a revolving door of coaches. It seems, right? They just keep changing coaches, and it's hard to implement a system that you can build off each year. As Marty St. Louis has said when he came in here, he wasn't going to throw the whole book of what he wants to do with the players at once. It's like, okay, we're going to do one page at a time and then one chapter at a time. And it's a very slow process that he's been given the time to do. And we've seen the results this season with Uri Slafkovsky, who earlier in the year, looked like he didn't belong in the NHL, but bit by bit, working on one little thing at a time. Okay, that we got that under control. Let's move on to page 2. Got that under control. Let's move on to chapter 2. And that's the way the patience that they've had in this rebuilding process. And we're starting now to sort of see it pay off. Like the system that they play, they still need some work in their defensive zone, but he doesn't want to, St. Louis they don't want to be a dump and chase or a trap team, right? They want to play an entertaining brand of hockey, which is good for fans here. And they're willing to live with some of the mistakes they have this season. They're willing to give Mike Matheson more of a leash than he might have in a couple of years from now. But they have a plan in place, a solid plan in place when it comes to drafting, developing, the type of hockey they want to play, the system they want to play, the concepts they have with Marty St. Louis. And Gorton and Hughes have confidence in Marty St. Louis that it's going to pay off. And we see signs now that I believe it will pay off in another 2 years down the road once they can bring in some more players, hopefully for them, some more talented forwards, which they really need, and get more guys accustomed to the system. And, talking with Logan Mayu at the end of the season when he came up and made his NHL debut, and I was asking him, how different is the system from Laval to Montreal. And he said, well, there's some differences here and there in defensive, but it's similar. So when he came up, it was pretty easy to, he said, I understood what Marty was telling me that he wanted me to do. So they have that right from the farm system moving up. There's a solid plan in place. And as I've said before in the podcast, and there's no guarantee it's going to work, but there's signs that it will work. Does that mean they're going to win a Stanley Cup? Maybe, but they've said right from the beginning that their goal is to become a team that doesn't just get into the playoffs every year, a team that gets into the playoffs and can compete every year. And think of a team like Tampa Bay or Boston or that. I think Tampa's got more playoff series wins in the last 15 years than any other team. That's what the Canadiens want to be. They want to get into the playoffs and have a chance to win the cup every year. It's not like, oh, we just got into the playoffs and anything can happen.
Yeah, it's crazy because you see the move that Tampa Bay made earlier this week in, reacquiring Ryan McDonagh, and it's kind of like, obviously we'll only be able to tell, next year what they could have, should have, would have done, but man, it seems like this was their opportunity to retool. And they're hanging on for dear life, reacquiring a veteran like that from their team that has won a couple Stanley Cups with them. Very, very curious because, if you're a team like Tampa, do you want to take the Boston route of just, keep recycling and retooling and keep that culture going? Or are you gonna, maybe take a step back for a couple of years and retool that way? It's interesting to see how the way these teams operate.
Well, McDonagh, as Canadiens fans probably remember, was the throw-in in the Scott Gomez trade. He's had a hell of a career, and it was interesting to read the quotes from Barry Trotz, the Predators GM, about why he traded him back to Tampa. He was talking with McDonagh at the end of the season, and McDonagh was saying how much his family loved Tampa, and that's where they planned to settle afterwards. And he basically said to Trotz, if there's any way you could work out some kind of a deal to go back there, I'd love it. And Trotz just talked about like how McDonagh is one of the best people he's ever dealt with in the NHL as a player, and talked about his leadership skills, and talked about like Barry Trotz has coached a lot of good hockey players and a lot of good teams. And, the high praise he had for McDonagh was really nice to hear. And we're talking about, Kent Hughes treating people right. Trotz treated McDonagh right. He called up Julien Brisebois apparently and said, look, he wants to come back. Can we work out some kind of a deal? And they did. And from Tampa's end, they must have missed, it's not all, people the Canadiens wanted them to trade all their veterans and just stay with all the kids. Guys like McDonagh bring an intangible value to a hockey team, the leadership that they can bring in a room. And Tampa obviously felt they missed that this year. They felt they were missing him. Maybe off the ice more so even than on the ice, just in what he brings and what kind of a role model he is for players and how guys look up to him. So when you talk about building a team, you thought, maybe they're going back to the guys, but Julien Brisebois is a really smart GM and Cooper's a smart coach. So they must have figured that I don't want to say they undervalued McDonagh because I don't know how valuable he is, but I guess maybe they undervalued how much they might miss him. And Barry Trotz's coach, like he didn't want to give him away, but it's a guy near the end of his career who really wanted to go back to Tampa, and he did. I mean, he as I say, he called up the Lightning GM and they worked out a deal. And we're talking about the Canadiens wanting to get guys to want to play in Montreal. If you're in Nashville and you see your GM treating a guy like that, or you're in Tampa and you see the way the GM treated him, that goes a long way in the future when you're trying to get other players to come play for you. And the opposite side of that is, the way Marc Bergevin treated a lot of players in Montreal, Markov or Radulov, and if you want loyalty by a dog, that gets around the league too. And that's another reason why guys in the past didn't want to come to Montreal. And that's something the Canadiens are trying to change, that image right now from the management standpoint.
Just back to, from a veteran standpoint and having those players on your roster and the importance that they bring, you want to bring it back to the Canadiens. You could look at all these teams and, I'm circling Dallas because I really think they're going to win the cup this year, despite what happened last night. I look at this blue line and yes, they have Miro Heiskanen, third overall, just an incredible talent, really. Yeah. He's obviously their number one, but if you take a look at that blue line, there's one really important player on that blue line who, he doesn't rack up the points, but he played some damn good hockey last night, and he's a guy you want around in a playoff series, which is Ryan Suter. The guy's 39 years old, and that's a that's a guy that, you know, people would probably scoff at if, he's not right for the Canadiens right now, let's say.
Yeah.
But, you know, if they were in the playoffs, you need guys like that. And who's the Canadiens guy like that right now is David Savard.
Yeah.
It's just to bring it back to that angle, you know, those guys, like you said, have such an immense value to the team. You see the value that David Savard brings in a non-playoff team right now. And for a team like Dallas that has this young, exciting core of forwards, for them to be able to have, you know, mentorship from Tyler Seguin, from Joe Pavelski and others, for them to be able to also look back at the blue line and see a guy like Ryan Suter. They're so well insulated with their leadership group and their veteran presence.
And Ryan Suter, I remember for years, he was like led the NHL in ice time every year. It was right up at the top, playing monster minutes. And you say McDonough's a great comparison to those two guys. They bring something like David Savard brought to the Canadiens. To know how important David Savard is to Canadiens, or has been, you just need to talk to the young defensemen. Their face light up when they talk about him. They love the guy. They love what he brings on the ice. They love what he brings on the ice. They love the just how steady he is. Like, he's the father figure for these guys. And he can still play. And it's remarkable that he can still play in this league, because he's not that quick. But he's, as Marty St. Louis has said several times, his feet don't move quick, but his brain moves quick. And that's really important in today's NHL. So when he's talking with Lane Hudson, who played with him when he got called up at the end of the season, and Lane Hudson has the speed and the feed and the vision and everything else. And David Savard will be able to give him little tips and just how to slow things down, how to slow the game down a little bit, which is something Juraj Slafkovsky, he's not a defenseman, obviously, but the game is just so fast for him when he came up. So, you know, as I've said before in the podcast, there's a reason why all the young guys, when they start off, Caden Gooley and Lane Hudson, they're paired with David Savard. Arbor Jacki was paired with David Savard when he came back from Laval. He's a steadying influence on and off the ice. And that's what McDonough is, and that's what Sutter is. And these guys are very valuable. You can't just have kids on your team. You need some guys to lead the way, some guys to show them what to do on the ice, what to do off the ice, how to handle pressure, how to take care of your body, all kinds of stuff that goes on. And, I can't remember one of the young defensemen I was talking to, and was talking about, Savard on the road will hang out with the young guys in their room sometime and just talk about all kinds of stuff. So it's a team. It's a long season. These guys spend a lot of time together. They see each other more than they see their family or their wives or their kids. And it's important to have these veteran guys to just keep everything in order and on the right track. Obviously, you can't have all guys like that, but it's important to have a few guys like that, a good mix of veterans and youth. And that's something we're seeing with the Canadiens. And that's why I don't know what the offers were for David Savard at the trade deadline. Whatever they were, there obviously weren't enough for Kent Hughes to make a deal. Maybe he does make a deal before the draft or at the draft to move Savard, because they are going to have to open up some spots for some of the younger guys. But they also have Mike Matheson, so it's not like if you get rid of Savard, you have no veteran leadership back there on the blue line. But that's one of the storylines going to be really interesting to follow, is what teams are willing to offer for Savard, whether Canes are accepted. But I think I've said this before on the podcast, I think Kent Hughes, I'd expect Savard to be traded probably closer to the deadline than during the offseason, unless it's obviously a really good offer that he gets.
Let's do it. Let's move on to the next one, because talking about draft trades, we've spoken about this in the past, and will they move David Savard, like you just mentioned? Mm-hmm. Will they move? Very unlikely in both of our opinions, but Mike Matheson. Will they move someone? Who knows? But there was a trade today in the NHL. Yeah. Chicago got the 18th overall pick and the 50th overall pick in exchange for the 20th, 54, and 61st. So very interesting that this happens. Just to not put a Canadian spin on it for a second, just very interesting that this happens, weeks away from the draft. Yeah. This kind of feels like a trade that would happen, depending on who's there and what you want. And do you want to move up and grab a guy? Maybe Chicago is loading up for another trade. Who knows?
The timing is like, that's the trade usually you expect to happen the day before the draft or the day of the draft. Gary Bettman, we have a trade to announce. Yeah, the timing is really in the middle of the playoff run for what is a big trade with so many picks going each way. So, I was surprised when I saw that today. I was like, wow, that's the timing is strange. I wonder if it might speed up other teams doing
Yep.
stuff. Maybe it speeds up the Canadiens' plans for what they're going to do if one team gets the ball rolling. I imagine the NHL would prefer that these trades don't happen during the playoff run, where they want the focus to be on that. But yeah, really interesting trade. And you say with Chicago, as I mentioned earlier, in the rebuilding phase, it was really interesting to see what they decided to do there.
Yep. So on the Canadian side of it, we've spoken about it multiple weeks, is that we think Kent Hughes is going to make another splash at the draft. And, I've said it from time and time again. I just don't see ever, you don't see that typical trade where teams are just moving up a couple spots in the draft. Well, now we have. Is that gonna, it's a copycat league. Is that gonna, open Pandora's box and now teams are going to start trading up? Maybe, but I hope so, because it'll be interesting to see what the Canadiens can pull off with all their picks that they have this year and next year in this year's draft. Very, very interesting move.
Yeah, I expect Kent Hughes to make the biggest trade he's made so far as GM, either right before this draft or at the draft. He's in a really good position with, he's got so many young defensemen. He's got 2 first-round picks this year. He's got 2 first-round picks next year. I think he likes to win. Marty St. Louis likes to win. They've been really patient to this point, but I think that they're looking to give this rebuild a little bit of a kick up the hill, a little bit of a boost. And they're in a really good position right now to do something like that. They have a lot of let's say draft picks and prospects that other teams might be interested in. And as we've mentioned before, they have to get some forwards. They have to get some more top 6 forwards who can produce offense.
Yeah, it's hard. He'll make his biggest, probably. I'm in agreement with you. I think that'll happen. But just because he makes one, it doesn't mean he won't make multiple.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's going to make multiple moves because I think he's seeing that more and more of that defense core or crop or whatever you want to call them, a lot of them are really ready. And, you can never underdevelop, or you can never overdevelop a player, but I think they want to start to see who can be a part of this future blue line. They want to get that settled before they move on. So they're going to make those decisions. And I think they're going to bring in multiple forwards. It's going to be interesting to see who that might be.
Yeah, and I mean, Justin Barron has to clear waivers if they want to send him back to Laval next year. That's a guy that I would expect they're going to try and move, because the way he's fallen down the depth chart, I don't think there's a spot for him in the top 7 next year. And I think they can package young defensemen with a first-round pick. They can package a couple of young defensemen together. But you're right. I think there's going to be more than one trade. I think there's going to be one big trade, and there might be a couple other minor trades. And it'll be interesting to see also in the free agent market, like, are they going to pick up? Maybe they're not going to pick up the Panarin type of free agent, but maybe they pick up another older type forward who they think can still produce some offense and give them a little offensive boost for a year or two, while some of the other guys like Joshua Raw come along and hopefully develop into those top 6 guys. So I'm really, it's been a long time since I've looked forward to an offseason with the Canadiens this much, because I think there's going to be a lot of stuff happening. And I think I'm really excited to see what this team is going to look like when they open next season. How many new faces there are, which young defensemen are still here, which ones aren't here. Is Logan Mayo going to start the season here? Lane Hudson, I'm almost certain, will start the season here. Where do they place Joshua Waugh, depending on the other forwards that they might acquire during the offseason? So there's a lot of reason for Habs fans to be excited leading into the draft and into free agency July 1st.
One player that a lot of people talk about when it comes to free agents and who the Canadiens might, take a swing at is Jonathan Marchessault.
Yeah.
That's obviously very, very attractive player. But I think he's going to cash in. Despite his age, he is going to, he's 33 years old now. I think he's going to cash in big time. I think one team could say, I'd like to add 40 goals to my team. Here's $8 million, $7 million for 3 years or whatever it may be. A player that I could see them signing on the offensive side, and maybe some people will like this, maybe some people won't. I think David Perron is the guy that they might circle and say, hey, this guy's a homegrown boy. He's from Quebec, and he's played, however many seasons. Seems like he's been in the NHL forever. Yeah. Solid player, tons of playoff experience. He knows he doesn't got much gas left in the tank. If a playoff contender doesn't make an offer to him, I think the Canadiens could look to him to provide some more leadership, for the offense, for the forwards group, because, yes, they have Brendan Gallagher, but that's kind of really the only guy that's, veteran forward, that's, proven leader, and, the young guys can look to. And they need a couple more guys like that.
Yeah, the question would be like, how many forward spots they still have open, right? Because you're still getting Armia's contract, you got to get a deal, and Josh Anderson's there, and Gallagher's there. That's one line right there. Three guys. David Perron's 35. He's 2 years older than Marchessault. 17 goals this season. Could he be a guy? Yeah, maybe for 1 year if they're looking to bring somebody in. For Marchessault, 42 goals this year, 33 years old. I don't know how. That 33, 34, 35 is the age where you start, wondering about guys. I don't see anybody offering more than a 3-year contract. And we're talking about how some guys don't want to come to Montreal. Here's a case of a guy who's a Quebecer. Maybe he'd like to finish his career playing here. I think back to Daniel Briere, who early in his career didn't want to play in Montreal, but ended up at the end of, have your family see you play in Montreal and play for the team you probably grew up cheering for and your family. So that's something you have to factor in when it comes to the free agency, as guys who would want to come to Montreal. And you'd have to think that Marchessault's a guy who would have had the choice over the two. That would be my choice. But as you're right, he's going to command a lot more on the market than a David Perron is, and maybe a David Perron fits in better with their salary structure. And as you said, to add a veteran forward. But I think at this point they're better. If they're going to add a veteran forward, I think they need a guy who's going to give them a good bump in offense. And I'm not sure if David Perron at this point in his career is that guy. As I said, you got leadership there with Brendan Gallagher already on forward, and got Joel Armia for another season here also, and hopefully for the Canadiens he plays like he did to finish last season. But Marchessault was a guy I would have interest in him. I really would if I was Ken Hughes, and adding in the fact that he's a guy who might want to come play here.
Yeah, it's just, for me, it's the dollar value that might scare me. But hey, listen.
But if it's short term, if that's why. I don't think Kent Hughes would offer him 3 years, maybe 2 years. And maybe another team offers 3, and maybe Kent Hughes is a smart guy and knows people around the league, and how much do you want to play in Montreal? How important is it to you to play in Montreal? And maybe he says really important. Maybe he says not important at all. I'm going to take where the best deal is. And if that's the case, then he's probably going to go somewhere else. But if he says, no, I'd like to play in Montreal, then Kent Hughes is a pretty good negotiator and might be able to work out, okay, how about if we give you this or this? And, if things go well, we'll look at re-signing you or something along those lines. But he's a player, as I said, I definitely have interest in him.
Yeah, no, it's hard not to, right? And you think,
and the fact that you're not giving up anything to get him apart from money,
right?
It's not going to cost prospects or.
The big thing for me, it's funny because you could look at his age and go, ooh, I don't know about that. He might be getting to his time, but then, like we've spoken about him, it was either last week or a couple weeks ago. Mentioned his name this episode, but Joe Pavelski. This guy is 39 years old. He scored 27 goals this year.
Yeah, he's a freak. He's a freak of nature. He really is.
He really is. Yeah,
he's going to turn 40 in July, and you say 20 and consistent. 27 goals this year, 28 goals last year, 27 goals a year before, 25 goals a year before that. He's just like he's a machine. He's unbelievable. And Cole Caulfield grew up watching. He was like Cole Caulfield's idol when he was a little boy growing up in Wisconsin, and he's a freak of nature. But those guys, there's not a lot of those guys around. There really aren't a lot of those guys. And he's just an incredible story how he just keeps scoring and scoring. 39 years old, and he's still able to do it. And, you know, the same with Marshall. He's 33. But it's some guys age quicker than others. You know, Father Time's undefeated, and some guys, they gradually age. You know, David Perron sort of an example of that. He his production has sort of tapered off year by year just a little bit. Other guys, it's sudden. You know, we mentioned Scott Gomez earlier. Scott Gomez was a great player in New Jersey. He came here and he was done. You know, he aged really quick. He just hit a wall and he was done. And you know, we're seeing what's happened with Josh Anderson last season. Like, he's not that old, but like it's hard to explain how his game went down last year. So that's one. There's so many things you're thinking being a GM in the NHL. All these things you have to factor in, right? It's salary cap and age, and is he declining? Is he not declining? And someone I know used to be a manager with one of the other NHL teams. We were talking analytics one day, and he was saying one of the analytics they really focused on was how players produce after a certain age. Like, for the average 33-year-old, what did he produce last season? For the average 34 or 35, is there some kind of an analytic data we can come up with which shows like what percentage on average guys' production drops off after a certain age? So it's interesting stuff, and I'm sure the Canadiens, you know, they have an advanced analytics department. I'm sure that's something they look into also.
Yeah, no, they have to, because that's the future of the league. But it's funny because, you know, just back to Joe Pavelski for a second. You know, it's so funny because his first year in Dallas, I remember he came off a 38-goal season in San Jose. First year in Dallas, everyone's like, oh my God, here he comes to the Dallas Stars. The Dallas Stars are here. This is it. Yeah. And he scored 14 goals. Everyone, ooh, he's over the hill. He's done. Yeah. Then in the playoffs, he scored 13 goals. Yeah. You know, so
just a seventh round draft pick too.
Yeah, unbelievable. And a shootout. I remember back in the day. I don't know if he still is, but this guy was the shootout expert.
Yeah.
Whenever watching the San Jose Sharks, they would put up his career shootout stats or the season. This guy would be 6 for 7 at any point, 10 for 7. 7 for 10. You know, just an unbelievable player.
Yeah, he was drafted 2 years. He was drafted 2 years after Cole Caulfield was born.
It's crazy. Wow. Yeah. No, it's nuts. And I really just think, you know, I think Jonathan Marchessault, as a guy who came on later in his career, I think it's a possibility that, you know, there's something there with him in that nature. Obviously not to the degree that Joe Pavelski is. Hey, listen, this is a Conn Smythe Trophy winner we're talking about.
Yeah. Marty St. Louis. You know what else? What him and Marty St. Louis have in common? Marchessault and St. Louis. Both of them. Both of them.
Go ahead. Oh, undrafted. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, both undrafted players.
You know what's funny is that we talk so much about the Tampa Bay Lightning and how they're able to find all these guys that just, you know, they it seems like any prospect that the Tampa Bay Lightning touch, it just turns to gold.
Yeah.
Tampa Bay Lightning had Jonathan Marchessault in their hands and let him slip away to their cross-state rival, and then their cross-state rival let him go in the expansion draft.
Yeah, it's we talk about the teams that when guys, they just keep going along, you know, Boston's like that in Tampa. And I think a lot of that has to do with the system that the players are coming into, right? Like, you know, the Bruins lose Bergeron and Krejci, and they just keep rolling along. And I think that has to do with just the culture they've built and the systems and concepts they have that are so well developed and so well built that other players can come in and fit into them. You know, the system, it's almost like the system is, I don't want to say more important than the players, because you need to have talent, you need to have skill. But if you have a really good system, a really good concept, and a really good culture, you can interchange players back and forth and keep winning. And again, that's what the Canadiens are trying to build here, where players can come and go, but you just keep that same system going. And I was talking before about the inconsistency or the constant change in Buffalo. They haven't made the playoffs in 13 years. They don't have that, right? Like, new coach comes in, new system. New coach comes in, new system. The players are like, you know, the guy who's played in Buffalo for 6 years has probably had, you know, 6 or 7 different systems that they've been trying to learn and take on and figure out. Whereas not a lot changes from year to year in Tampa. The players change, but they play that style of hockey. Same in Boston. The Bruins play that same style of hockey. We're seeing it in Florida now. Florida just plays. They have that style of hockey they play. It's inbred in the players that are there. Players who come in know what they're getting into. It's well defined. It's well explained, and they fit into it and they move on as a team. And I think when you have constant change, it makes it hard to do that, right? It makes it hard to have a team that's cohesive, where you're just constantly changing and changing and changing and changing for the sake of changing. And I think Buffalo is the perfect example of that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's again.
Edmonton, you look at Edmonton, though, they had a lot of coaching changes too.
Yeah,
and they had a new coach come in and obviously put in some structure that had been maybe missing before, and was able to implement it pretty quickly. So I would expect moving forward, they're going to have a stable coach there for a while, and that system's only get better. So the Oilers are going to I'd expect the Oilers to be like a legitimate Stanley Cup contender for another 3, 4, 5 years with the talent they have and the way they've figured things out this season after they were so bad at the beginning. I mean, goaltending was part of it, but they just they're a much more well-structured team now when you watch them play.
Well, that's it. When you have a player like Connor McDavid, he'll will you to the playoffs, so
and he's the best player in the league and one of the hardest working players in the league, like Sidney Crosby does. And that's the key. I mean, he works his butt off when he's out there, and he takes a beating. I mean, guys run him and hit him, and we saw it happen in Vancouver. He comes to play in the playoffs. He's a warrior. He's really talented. Probably best player in the world right now, but he gets you to the playoffs, and now we're seeing with the structure the Oilers have and what they're playing, he can get you through the playoffs too.
Well, there you go. Hopefully the Canadiens can find, someone, not exactly, because that doesn't happen too often. I mean, hey, if they found a Connor McDavid, that'd be great.
But even with McDavid, they haven't, they said they won, was it 5 or 6? It's not like they got Connor McDavid and here we go. It's not like Chicago got Connor Bedard and here we go. Lafreniere with the Rangers, he was horrible the first couple of years he was there, right? People were thinking he was a bust. Starting to see him coming along now.
Oh man, just what an unfortunate bounce for him in game one, man. Oh man,
that was almost like a brain cramp, like what he was doing.
But you know what though, that whole play was just, it took 3. They say it takes 2 to tango. It took 3 to tango on that play. It was Shesterkin playing it off the boards, just coming out and playing it off a straight angle off the boards, and then, but really, Condre Miller just said, all right, I'm out of here. And then Lafreniere kind of whacks it into his own net. Just
a nice deflection. It was a nice deflection.
It was great. It was a great deflection. It just happened to be on the wrong net. Just a comedy of errors. But hey, they'll the Rangers are a tough team. Like we said, that's Jeff Gorton's blueprint. So we'll see. We'll see what goes on. And in a week's time, we'll be a week closer to the NHL draft, a week closer to the Stanley Cup being handed out, and maybe some game 5s, 6s, and 7s on our way next by the time we're talking next week.
Yeah, and Jeff Gorton's watching the Rangers closely, as he said. I mean, he still has a connection to that team. Good news for Canadiens fans with Elliot Friedman reporting recently. The Columbus Blue Jackets were denied permission to talk to Jeff Gorton about taking a management job there, which doesn't surprise me. When Jeff Molson hired Gordon, this is a long-range plan, rebuild plan. He's not going to let the guy who's at the head of it leave to go somewhere else. So it goes back to that stability we were talking about before, and the Canadiens have it now with Gorton and Hughes and St. Louis, and we'll see moving forward whether it works or not.
Yeah, we shall. And listen, in the meantime, we get to see if we got a whole summer to wait for it. I think it'll happen in the next 30 days or so, 35 days or so, if it happens, if if Kent Hughes pulls off the biggest trade of his GMing career with the Montreal Canadiens. Stu, enjoy the weather this weekend, because Monday it's going to be wet. It's going to be a wet one. So enjoy your weekend, and we'll talk to you next week.
You too. See you then.
All right, that was Stu Cowan. I'm Matt Ohayon. Just before I end, another reminder, Tony will be hosting a live podcast from Souvlaki Authentique Lachine on May 30th at 1 p.m. Come meet Tony and the Sick team and try out their delicious menu. Located at 1050 Rue Notre Dame in Lachine. That's a reminder for all you sick animals, I'll call you, the Sick Army. We're very happy to have you along for the ride, growing every day, every week. Thank you very much for listening. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next time.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by Energy Transportation Group, driven to be different. Bittt, embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination.